Listening to the utopian renderings of AI's glittering potential, Silicon Valley would have you believe it's all upside.
Will it create a group of people that ask more questions?
What if we started to be more human again?
In the world where people have jobs and live in communities, there's plenty of skepticism.
The worst nightmares of sci-fi, when you speak to technologists in Silicon Valley right now, those nightmares are actually modestly plausible realities over the next decade or so.
If we try and hold back the tide, my nervousness is that Australian businesses will just be overtaken by overseas businesses, and then we will actually lose more jobs.
In a major speech today at Sydney University, the Prime Minister offered his own long-awaited plan to regulate and support the AI revolution.
We cannot settle for a short-term boom in capital expenditure and construction.
After months of speculation, the government has settled the threshold question about whether there should be national legislation to manage AI, likening it to when rules and systems were established for civil aviation in the 1920s and genetics in the 1990s. Anthony Albanese said laws will come early next year. Data centre builders will be forced to become net energy suppliers, protecting households from higher energy bills and limit water usage.
We cannot revisit this issue after companies have built whatever they want, wherever they want.
Vowing to avoid a repeat of the mistakes of political indifference that allowed social media to run rampant before the damage to young people was known, the Prime Minister has raised expectations he will protect Australians, including their copyrights.
Australian writers, musicians, artists and journalists must retain ownership and control of their work.
The Prime Minister's speech shows he intends government to be more interventionist than some would like. But he's also betting the coalition is running a political risk with a more laissez-faire approach that limits the ability of unions to resist or shape the AI revolution.
Can you imagine what it would have been like if unions had had a right of veto as to whether companies could use the internet? But that's exactly what it is that Labor are talking about now.
A whole lot of companies will just look at the dollars and the profit to be made and think, yeah, we'll just get rid of people and replace them. If they think they're going to get away with that in Australia, I've got another thing coming for them.
By contrast, the Greens say the government is being too permissive.
Australia needs a moratorium, a clear moratorium on new data centres, a clear moratorium on further contracts with foreign tech companies with government, until we have real legislated protections in place.
Hundreds of global economists this week warned of the risks from AI. Among them, US-based Justin Wolfers and ANU senior lecturer Ashley Craig.
We should think carefully about to what extent government should get involved, whether that's regulation in how the models are trained, whether it's mitigating certain costs, like, say, environmental costs, for example, in the training of the models, or whether we want to steer the way that it's applied.
I reckon that AI is somewhere between being 1/10 of the Industrial Revolution and double it. And the Industrial Revolution fundamentally changed society and the economy forever. And we're on the cusp of a similar moment like that.
Both economists say there should be more debate about AI and its effects.
I read in all different parts of economics, and I read quite deeply across lots of different areas. And then the one special skill I have in the world is that I can turn that into simple, straightforward English. Turns out that's what a large language model can do. And so I feel right now the way auto workers would have felt in the 1970s, that I see robots that are coming directly for my job right now.
I'm pretty sceptical, actually, that in the long term these things are going to replace all human labour in those types of disastrous scenarios. But you could have a period where a lot of people are pushed out of work and it's very painful for quite some time, which could mean decades.
I spoke to the Prime Minister earlier. Prime Minister, welcome.
Good to be with you.
What is driving this switch to more central control of artificial intelligence? Is it voter angst about the impact on their jobs, on their communities, on their safety?
That this change is happening, and we either allow it to take its course without any control or regulation, or we're determined to shape the change. Artificial intelligence is here. It's having an impact on all of our lives, on the way that we work, the way that the economy functions. but we need to seize the opportunities that come with it, shape it so it is in Australia's interests, which was the theme of the speech today.
So just so I understand it, in terms of this new office that's going to sit within your office in the government, all those issues around safety, around planning, around workplace copyright, will they be finally determined in that office?
So there is coordination. Well, they'll be determined in the Cabinet room, which is where we make decisions as a government. But what we will have is a coordination body at the highest level of government in the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet. We will have Australian standards for AI. They will be world's best practice. And we can set an agenda, I think, not just for Australia, but for the world. We're an attractive destination for investment because of the advantages that we have. We're a Five Eyes country. We have space that is required for these new data centres. We have an opportunity located where we are in the fastest growing region of the world, and we need to seize the opportunities, but we also need to manage the risks which are there to make sure that we're not destroying jobs, that we're creating jobs.
The scale of AI investment is mind-boggling. You said in the speech today you want to do more than manage investments from elsewhere, but isn't that what you're doing? Canada is spending $2 billion building sovereign computer capacity for Canada. The UK is doing the same. You say today the NBN is a good example of sovereign capability in Australia. Why not do the same with AI?
What we will be doing is managing what will overwhelmingly be private sector investment.
But why are those countries, why is the UK and Canada doing investment in sovereign capability and we're not?
This will be all about sovereignty, but the way that you'll do that is by having Australian standards and Australian rules around it so that there's clarity. If you come and invest here, your investment is welcome, but these are the conditions. So you want to build a big data centre, you have to provide the energy, so that's additional to the grid. You have to pay for transmission. If there are any additional water usage, you have to fund that as well. And it needs to be located in an appropriate location as well. So setting those standards, providing that clarity and that certainty will add to Australia as an important investment destination. This has the opportunity to transform the way that our society functions, and that will occur. It's a matter of whether you sit back and allow it to take its course or whether you shape it, and we're determined to shape it.
Let me just go to those questions around energy. You say you're putting, you're going to put hard expectations on companies building data centres here. Of course, what's happened in other places, including in the US, is that communities have seen their power bills go up. Can you guarantee that you will protect Australians from those kinds of impacts we've seen elsewhere?
Yes, and that's the point of having Australian standards and being very clear upfront, getting ahead of these issues rather than trying to retrofit once it has occurred.
Well, who will be responsible for ensuring that a data centre does not exceed its energy or water use?
Well, as a condition of approval, and that's why I'll take the proposition for Australian standards to a meeting of the National Cabinet next month, because a lot of planning approvals, of course, come through state and local government. So we want the three tiers of government to work together with the private sector, with Australian businesses. And one of the benefits of having the Office of Artificial Intelligence in the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet is working with those bodies outside, including in our universities who are working in this area to make sure that we get this right, that we shape this change in Australia's interests.
And just to be clear, those standards will be the same across the country. If you're a data centre builder, you will face the same standards in Victoria that you would in the Northern Territory or Western Australia.
That's precisely why we're taking it to the National Cabinet. I think that's important because otherwise what you will have is states playing each other off and companies trying to take advantage, as occurs with areas like sporting events. So an operator goes to one state and says, if you give us a bigger incentive, we'll come to you rather than another state.
Leverage that.
We need to stop that. We need a national approach. I think there will be recognition from the premiers and chief ministers that this is a national interest question, which is why we're getting ahead of that, and I'll convene the Cabinet.
Again, for clarity, these standards, these will be more than expectations. These will be conditions that must be met and adhered to.
Oh, these are mandatory. It's very clear that that's what we're doing, just as we want to mandate as well issues such as intellectual property. Frankly, so that if you're a journalist or a musician or a writer, you continue to have control over what is, after all, your property, your creativity, and that you not only have control over its use, but you also are paid if you agree to it being used.
So this is obviously one of the most controversial points for those overseas investors coming here. They say that it's unrealistic for them to have to negotiate with every single rights holder. You're telling them, companies like Anthropic, that that is what they must do.
Well, that's exactly right. And when you actually look at the way it would operate in practice as well, there are, in the music industry, for example, overwhelmingly, there are a number of major operators.
Sure, but there are also individuals, and more so in the current environment.
No, that's correct.
Yeah.
And we want to make sure that their interests are protected.
So you're prepared to see a company like Anthropic, with the massive potential investment it's got on the table in Australia, you're prepared for them to walk away rather than bend on that issue of copyright?
We're confident that the advantages that Australia provides will see significant investment here. I've met with a range of the companies. We've made clear to them our position, and today we've made that very publicly clear as well. We've said that we'll have the National Cabinet to get that coordination. We've set up the Office of Artificial Intelligence today, and early next year we'll be legislating.
On the subject of jobs, now it's the case that the jobs apocalypse hasn't quite arrived in the way that many of the big players thought it would, but some of that is to do with maybe slower than expected adoption of AI at the kind of enterprise level. How do you secure jobs? Because it may not be an apocalypse, but they're still talking about very significant changes to the working life of a country like Australia. How do you secure jobs beyond the kind of motherhood statements?
What you recognise is that with every form of new technology, jobs do change.
Yeah, but this is not a new form of technology like another. You've got people like Demis Hassabis from Google saying this is bigger than the Industrial Revolution. This is equivalent to fire.
It is incredibly significant. Yep. No question about that. But what also is clear is that jobs will be created. Jobs will change in the way that they function, and that's happening now. So it isn't a question of if or when. The key question is how. How does artificial intelligence have an impact on the way that we work, the way that we engage socially, on the way that our country operates, both domestically but also internationally as well? And what we want to do is to seize the opportunities which are there by mitigating the risks which are there, by making sure as well that you build that social licence, and you build social licence by making sure that people's concerns, which are legitimate, are dealt with in an open, frank and clear way, and providing clarity, both the benefits but also the obligations that will come with this investment.
Your colleague, former Cabinet colleague Ed Husic, says that term social licence is almost meaningless when it comes to a technology as powerful as this.
Well, it's not at all. The fact is that social licence is what companies want. It's what the ABC wants as well.
Yeah, but you don't do it without regulation as well.
And I've already said that we're doing that, and that's something that Ed wouldn't be familiar with, because this has been a cabinet process. There's been a lot of consultation in the lead up to today's speech, which reflects a cabinet decision that was made earlier this week, but not one that occurred with just one discussion, one that occurred as my government operates, properly having processes, giving consideration, coming to an orderly decision, and then setting up a time frame for implementation on delivering a positive outcome.
Just on the question of jobs, the ACTU wants enforceable agreements where businesses must consult their workers before introducing AI. Do you support that?
Well, enterprise bargaining, of course, occurs, and that encourages employers and employees.
Sure, and on that specific question?
Well, that encourages employers and employees to work together. I don't sit in those negotiations. That's something that's worked out between employers and employees.
Sure, but do you support the concept that workers should have a say as to whether or not a particular AI is introduced into a workplace?
I support the concept that businesses and unions are always better off, and businesses which are most successful are ones that bring their workforce with them, including on the journey of change.
What happens if workers don't want to introduce AI and the owners of a company do?
Well, AI is happening. It's having an impact immediately, I'm sure, in this studio.
So you're encouraging workers to allow the entry of AI into their workplaces?
I'm encouraging workers to recognise that artificial intelligence is happening. Change is happening, and they have an interest in shaping that change because if not, then they don't get a say. So I'm encouraging constructive engagement. Businesses can have massive productivity benefits from use of AI. We are seeing that. We need to make sure that workers, though, aren't shut out of those discussions. They have an interest in businesses being successful because the more successful businesses means better workplaces and better conditions.
Prime Minister, thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you.
So the Prime Minister knows he must now walk a fine line between the promise of AI and widespread anxiety in the community. Having created the Office of AI, he'll now wear the responsibility for how it all unfolds. The front line of that anxiety is really about data centres for now, where they'll be built and where the energy and water to run them is going to come from. Protests against data centres have erupted across the world, fuelled by suspicions that governments are putting companies and their investments first and people last. Belinda Dennett is the CEO of Data Centres Australia and joins me here in Sydney. And Adam Bandt was the leader of the Greens. He's now the CEO of the Australian Conservation Foundation. He joins me from Melbourne. You're both very welcome to 7:30.
Thanks, Sarah.
Belinda, I'll start with you. Is the Prime Minister's centrally controlled Office of AI plus new national regulations necessary or overkill?
I think what it does is signals his ambition, Australia's ambition, to be a leader, to take some control over how AI is built and created. And the way you do that is you have the infrastructure here in Australia. You make sure that our values and our culture are reflected in the tools that are built. So we welcome that ambition. We agree with his broad principles that data centre operators should invest in the energy they use and the energy infrastructure, the water infrastructure. So we welcome that, and we also have to be very engaged with the communities in which we're building.
All right, we'll come back to the things that maybe you don't welcome so much, but Adam Bandt, it's good to have you back on the programme. Do you think that the Prime Minister's guarantees on water and energy are credible?
It's good that we're going to see legislation. We heard about the strongest possible protection for copyright. That's a good thing, but we didn't hear about the strongest possible protection for water and for energy. By their nature, these data centres are water hogs and energy vampires, where there's some forecasts of up to 11% of our total grid usage now being data centre driven by 2030, and we're talking about the largest one that's on the books at the moment having an energy consumption greater than the Tomago aluminium smelter. So we're not talking about trivial things, we're talking about very, very serious users. And in terms of water, the water utilities at the moment are getting applications for average data centres that are drawing on about 80,000 homes a day worth of water, and Sydney Water says it could be looking at 25% of the drinking water, of Sydney's water, being used for data centres over coming years.
Adam, let me just jump in here, because your former party, the Greens, want a moratorium, no more data centres to be built until new regulations come in. Do you support that?
Yes, and us and a number of other environment groups have been calling for that for some time. Like, we're already facing a crunch for building enough renewable energy for this country to meet its climate goals and to meet its the existing energy goals. Now, when you add another up to 11% of unexpected demand into that, it is right that these data centres should be asked to build the renewable energy that goes along with it, and it be genuinely additional.
All right, Adam. Let's bring in Belinda Dennett. Well, first of all, are you water hogs and vampires? Number one, and two, what would a pause do to the industry in Australia?
So data centres currently use 2% of the energy grid. That's about the same as shopping centres. It will increase as we build more capacity, around 6% by 2030. That is manageable. If you look at Australia's data centre capacity, it's about 1/50th of what's happening in the US. Water use is actually quite...
May I say, that sort of stands to reason, that number?
Yeah. Quite moderate in terms of 0.04% of Australia's water use, 2.3% of the water we use in manufacturing in data centres. We're seeing a lot of innovation in that space towards closed-loop cooling, new innovations that use minimal amount of water. So the water problem is being solved for using recycled water. We've just had new data centres announce recycled water treatments.
Should all data centres in the future, should it be part of these regulations that it must be using recycled water?
I think where it's available. One of the challenges in Australia is getting access to recycled water, getting that availability, having the right legislation in place that makes that water available. All our operators want to use recycled water or non-potable water sources. So that's, again, the principle is shared. Making that happen and how you implement it is where the challenges come.
What about, just before I come back to Adam Bandt, what about energy? Are you going to be producing your own energy? You're not going to be able to create new renewable energy projects in time to supply these data centres. So are you going to be able to supply energy, or are you going to be competing with energy with the rest of Australia, competing for energy?
So let's start with what's already happening. Data centre operators are already, and their customers, so this is done jointly. The customer uses 80% of the energy, the operator around 20%, so it's done jointly. Currently offsetting 70% of energy use with renewable energy projects.
What about the other 30?
We would like to get there, and you've just flagged some of those challenges. We've got renewable energy projects that have challenges themselves getting built in time. Matching that timing is one of the challenges that we need to overcome. So how legislation fixes that is the question when this becomes due. In principle, we support it. Most of our operators have commitments to offset 100% of their energy use. How we get there and how the country gets there is the challenge.
All right, Adam Bandt, one of the phrases used by the Prime Minister today was that these data centres would, would have to be located in appropriate locations. Is there any agreement on what appropriate locations are?
Well, water is obviously a very, very big question, and so is energy use. And with energy use, it needs to be additional and it needs to be renewable. And so far, we haven't got any indication that those two are going to be enshrined in law. The Prime Minister did use the word additional in your interview with him. If it's genuinely additional, as in the data centres are going to build it or fund the construction of it, and it's renewable, then that can address some of these problems. But what we're seeing at the moment, last year, we saw about 80% of the power generation for these new hyperscale data centres around the world being with gas-fired power stations. And that's what we're seeing in Australia as well. Proposals in New South Wales for a gas-fired power station to fund a big data plant that would wipe out all of New South Wales emissions reductions. Gas is as dirty as coal, but meanwhile you've got companies in the Northern Territory, for example, saying they want to frack the Beetaloo Basin, release a climate bomb and build a data centre.
All right, hold on. I'm going to stop you there, actually, not least because you used a Greens phrase and you're not supposed to be doing Greens phrases anymore with your climate bomb. Let me just take it back there. In terms of that 30%,
yeah.
I mean, Adam Bandt makes the point that if that 30% is not coming from renewable energy, where is it coming from? So just take us back to that.
So data centres connect to the energy grid. What's in the grid is a determination of government policy and market forces. They don't connect directly to a renewable energy source. What our companies are doing is investing in renewable projects. They're not designed to build new renewable energy projects. I think if you had that, you want data centre operators to build energy, that's probably what's happened in the US, where you've seen gas plants and the like. We play a really important role in underwriting renewable energy projects, giving them financial certainty. They wouldn't be built without an off-taker. Data centres are a great off-taker because they're 24/7, a steady, reliable source of energy.
All right, a question to both of you to finish off. Adam Bandt, one of the reasons we're talking about this particular subject is because of the fears that are so widespread in the community, more broadly about AI. Do you think the government taking more centralised control of this can do something, briefly, to alleviate the fears in the community?
Oh, look, I do think that people want to see governments acting in the public interest and not for vested interests. We do live in an era where big corporations have too much power, and I think people want to see government step in. But I think the question is going to be that we'll be looking at is look at the detail of the legislation. Is it going to require additional and renewable generation? And is it going to put a firewall between the water that is used by these centres and the drinking water that we rely on? I'm very concerned about water sovereignty. I don't think the Murray can take much more water being dragged out of it, and yet we're talking about new data centres in South Australia. And if the data centres are able to guarantee now that they're not going to build new gas-fired power plants to power their data centres, that would be a great thing to hear.
Well, we're going to have to wrap it up, but I think it's too complex a question to begin again. I'm just going to say for now, Belinda Dennett, thank you very much indeed for coming and explaining the position of the data centre sector. Adam Bandt, it's great to have you back on the programme. Obviously, we're going to be talking about this a great deal. I thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.